Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Indianaut podcast, where we interview some of India's next best analytical and creative minds who are not only revolutionizing their own field, but at the same time transforming India's entrepreneurial ecosystem one step at a time. Our guest for the day is a partner at Antler India. Antler is a global early stage venture capital firm with 17 offices across 5 continents. It was in June 2020 when Antler decided to expand their offerings to India, which was led by our guest. Before Antler India, he co-founded Urban Ladder in 2012. As co-founder and chief product and technology officer, he helped raise over $100 million in venture capital from marquee investors and helped build Urban Ladder into one of India's most loved online furniture brands. We have with us Rajiv Srivatsa. Let us jump right into the conversation. Hi Rajiv, I hope you're all settled in.
Yes, thanks for having me, Gautam.
Excellent, excellent. So let's get started. So Rajiv, just to give our viewers some context, Antler was founded in Singapore in 2017 by a team of experienced entrepreneurs, investors, and company builders. And Antler is currently a global early stage VC with, I think, 17 offices across 5 continents. And one of them is right here in India. And in June 2020, when Antler actually decided to, expand their offerings to India, they, approached you to, you, Rajiv Srivatsa, the co-founder of Urban Ladder, to helm this launch. So in your own words, tell us your experience in setting up Antler's India presence back in 2020.
I think the great part of setting up Antler has been that it felt very similar to the first 12, 18 months of Urban Ladder,
All right.
where you are just being a founder, right? Because the way Antler is set up is a very federated approach. Antler sort of gets one or two people in every geography and pretty much gets them to set up everything from scratch, right? That includes the fund, so your capital raising, like just like any other founder. That includes setting up the office, getting the first few hires, deciding what needs to be done in the market, doing customer research. So pretty much like starting up Urban Ladder 10 years back. All of those activities that I did in the first few months is exactly what I did in a very different context in 2020 with Antler. It took me 6 months, obviously, just like it took 6 months to launch Urban Ladder. It took me 6 months. So we really launched Antler in India in 2021 January. And I was lucky to find my co-founder also in that process, very similar to Urban Ladder, that was Nitin. And so Nitin and me sort of have spent, those 6 months working together between June 2020 and December 2020, and launched this in Jan 2021. Hired, did all of the usual stuff, right, that you do as a startup. And that way, I think it's been a phenomenal learning experience, also because it's a very different context. And today, of course, Antler is present, as you said, in many different geographies. It feels very, very difficult to keep count because almost every month there's a new geography that's being launched. So we are now in Korea, we are now in Japan, we are in Canada, we are in Vietnam, we are in Indonesia. It's very difficult to keep track. But I think the whole idea of Antler is to build a really, truly global powerhouse, which is somewhere local in nature, right? Because the entire team is local, which is very different from many other VCs and or others who play in the pre-seed stage, where there's a lot of decision making and there's a lot of power that happens in maybe one geography, and other geographies act as satellites. Here it's truly global, local, that way. Every Antler geography acts in its own way in terms of its own decisions, and the central team, which is based out of Singapore, acts as more the platform team. So provides a technology platform underlying, provides a bunch of
Understood.
capital resources underlying, but really the decision making and running the show happens in the local geography across all of these different geographies.
Understood. So just to summarize, I believe the Antler Global Office acts as an enabler for each and every one of the local offices, and each and every one of the local offices works in independent manner. That's
That's correct.
excellent. That's excellent, Rajiv. So that technically makes you like a second time founder or something. but and
That's true. It's almost like a complete founding journey for Antler too. It's exactly in every sense feels like the first 18 months of Urban Ladder. And I tell this to people a lot, actually.
Right. So let's come to Urban Ladder. Before Antler, your first project was Urban Ladder, which you co-founded in 2012. And as co-founder and chief product and technology officer, you helped raise over $100 million in venture capital from marquee investors, and helped build Urban Ladder into one of India's most loved online furniture brands. So how did you get into entrepreneurship, and how did Urban Ladder start? In as we like to say in our podcast, tell us your Indianaut origin story.
That's a, I can just talk a lot on that, but let me try and give you a shorter version of it, right? Which is, I think for me, if you look at Ashish and me, we go back a long way in terms of we started doing stuff together in campus, which was in IIM Bangalore in 2002 to 2004, right? We were next door neighbors and we used to pretty much do every single extracurricular activity in campus. I built the entire campus intranet. We both were part of a lot of clubs, and every opportunity we used to do stuff in campus. And for us it was really about creating legacy, creating impact at that scale within a small campus of 400 people. And we went our own ways right after campus. Ashish went to McKinsey in 2004. I joined Cognizant. Both of us managed to land in Bangalore in 2008, and did our own thing. So I was in Yahoo for 4 years building consumer products, and Ashish joined as the chief operating officer of Amar Chitakatha. And during those 4 years, pretty much every other weekend we used to meet up, right?
All right.
And talk about the growing startup ecosystem. At that time, that was just Flipkart and maybe Snapdeal, and a bunch of these 3-4 companies which sort of became the inspirations for the next set of entrepreneurs who started in 2010. And I think one thing led to the other, and over those 4 years, I think we just brainstormed a lot of ideas. None of it came into any action. But somewhere around 2011, which is when I think the big company was getting to me in terms of making more presentations than products at Yahoo. And Yahoo was a great experience, right? I learned so much in terms of product management for the consumer world, consumer research, building products ground up, working with UX and engineers. So it gave me a lot of confidence to build internet products after Cognizant, which was more enterprise, right? For 4 years in Cognizant. And the same, Ashish had a lot of interfaces to investors because of Amar Chitrakatha, and he raised a bunch of capital at ACK. And he also had a huge amount of experience running a physical world operation, right? In terms of supply chain,
Understood.
in terms of really running business and managing big teams and stuff. So I think between the two of us, we felt that there was enough and more of a complementary skill, and also a working relationship in the past from campus days. And one thing led to the other, and I can get into the next level details on that in case you want to go there. But I think 2011 end is when we said, okay, let's do something together. And the first idea, funnily enough, was not even furniture; it was online grocery.
Okay.
We spent a bunch of time, I think probably a couple of months around the end of 2011, to say that, hey, online grocery is great as a market. It's a clear consumer need, but I don't think we will be passionate about building something there. And this was the days when there was no big basket, there was none of the other players were there, right? We just didn't feel as passionately about the problem. And then we moved from online furniture to a variety of sectors, everything from education to healthcare to energy to a lot of other ideas. And then somewhere landed on commerce and the women as a customer. Then we met Vani, who became our first investor, Vani Kola of Kalari, and sort of
Excellent.
brainstormed a bunch of times with her. And she said, hey, that's too broad a segment. And I already have investments in Mintra and I remember a couple of other firms. And why don't you go more deeper into a specific category? Then we chose
Right.
home because we
Okay.
felt that home was where the market was big, the need was very big. And we were also passionate about really building something in the home space because both of us felt that it was a big product game. There was just a lack of good quality products, and the buying experience online I felt was also extremely going to be very difficult to crack, right? So working on more challenging problems which we were more passionate about was a big reason why we chose home rather than some other category. So by December 2011, I think it was clear that we were going to go home, and within home we were going to pick furniture as the first category because we felt you would rather attack the hardest problem first, the biggest consumer problem first, rather than something which is easier to execute like decor or trinkets and stuff. So that all happened Jan 2011, and we spent the next 6 months, as I said earlier, to sort of set up Urban Ladder between Jan 2012 and June 2012. We also raised capital from Kalari. Vani became our first investor during that process. We hired, we raised capital, all the things that I shared with the first 6 months of Antler 2. I just had my co-founder earlier. Here I managed to find my co-founder within those 6 months. And launched in July 2012. This year we are going to actually cross 10 years actually in July of 2022.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I think this past decade has been like, quite exciting for you. And because the thrill and the rush and the adrenaline of actually starting up, I think you went through that experience twice in the same decade. So that's excellent.
Yeah, that's the other way to look at it. And just those 8, 9 years through that urban ladder journey of a lot of highs and lows and ups and downs, I think,
Right.
it's not that your next experience won't have the highs and the lows. It's just that at least it's made me, what I am today, and hopefully handle some of that way better.
Definitely, definitely. I completely agree with you. So, Rajiv, I want to move now to basically your investment philosophy and focus on that a bit. Okay. So, let's talk about India first. Okay. So, India has the third biggest startup ecosystem after US and China. And according to the recently released economic survey, India has, I think, 83 unicorns worth $278 billion. And a lot of this has been due to how 2021 has been such a stellar year for the Indian startup ecosystem, with close to 44 unicorns in 2021 itself. So what is your personal bull case for the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem? And taking that a step further, what sectors and industries are you specifically the most bullish about when it comes to India?
I think the bull case for India is pretty obvious, right? And this is not because there have been, let's say, 40 unicorns last year. We as a country are going to increase our GDP, per capita as well as GDP. And there's always an inflection point as an economy in terms of when that consumerism is going to really take off, right? And that's already happened, right? And we've had these swings, as I said, over the years, even the last decade. But if you look at just, there are a lot of one-way trends in terms of access to 4G, thanks to Reliance Geo, in terms of access to devices, just the way mobile was a revolution last decade. This decade, everyone is predicting, and I'm a big believer in that. AR and VR is going to be that, right? In terms of really taking technology to the next set of masses. And there's a lot of enablers there in terms of 5G and in terms of just core infrastructure. So I would say every part of your life, whether that's education, whether that's jobs, whether that's relationships, whether that's gaming, media, entertainment, you're going to 100% use technology, and it doesn't matter whether you're a 20-year-old or a 50-year-old, right? So if that's the bull case, clearly, as I said, the whole my day job at Antler is based on that bull case, right? Which is to say that I certainly strongly believe in that. But there is also one additional angle there, right? Which is, it's not just companies building for the Indian economy and this huge increasing customer base. There is also built from India for the world, right? Which is something that you're seeing with many companies, and I'm not talking only SaaS, right? I'm talking even consumer companies.
All
Web
right.
3.0, the decentralized web, is a great example, right? Whether that's blockchain, whether that's DeFi, whether that's DAO, whether that's NFTs, you would see a lot of companies that are built globally for customers globally, because the whole core proposition of this Web 3.0 is this very decentralized web, right? And what is phenomenal is you see a lot of young Indian founders take off on a lot of stuff which is related to Web 3.0. The other two, three aspects that Indian founders and young Indian folks are very, very passionate about and are able to relate to a lot is stuff like climate, right? Things which the next set of 20-year-olds are very passionate about. Climate, whether that's EVs, you see a lot of regulations even in this budget on EVs and opening up the EV market in the next 10 years. That's going to be massive. Everything related to climate and ESG, everything related to alternate meat, and a variety of fronts which is going to directly or indirectly impact the climate. Third is which I already mentioned, which is AR and VR. In terms of, again, people talk about the metaverse, and whole of Facebook rebranding sort of makes a big case for it. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. The core logic of why the metaverse or AR and VR will take off, right? There is no way on earth that 7 billion people in this world are going to enjoy the fruits that the 500, 600 million, which is 1/10 of the population today, enjoy because of wealth, right? Because if, let's say, everyone in this world had the money, would we have enough flights to land in Switzerland? Would Switzerland be able to take so much load? Would
Right.
Stanford have enough seats for 10x the audience? Won't the quality of the education suffer?
Right.
So every category, whether that's healthcare, whether that's education, whether that's travel, whether that's entertainment, you can't have a million people in a live concert, even if everyone wants to go and had the money, right? A live concert
Right.
can only take so many people. So I think the power of AR and VR is so humongous that for people and countries, specifically developing countries where the reality sucks, right? In terms of people in developing countries, you are able to give them a false or a fake world, right? And I would urge anyone who has not watched this movie Ready Player One to watch it many,
Oh,
many
okay.
times.
So I was just about to refer to Ready Player One. That what you've exactly mentioned right now is a very Ready Player One is philosophy that
And
that
that's true. And
yeah.
see, the thing is, devices have taken far more time than people anticipated they would to get to that scale. But I
Right.
somehow, and I've been one of those who was completely wrong in that. I thought by 2020 VR is going to take over, and it's not happened. In Urban Ladder, we invested in VR in 2016, way before
All right.
devices were popular, and we made a phenomenal app which is for an infinite store experience inside the VR world. Right?
All
You
right.
can simulate e-commerce at a factor which is nx better in terms of its experience inside the VR world. But if you see the latest devices that Oculus is, or all the talk about Apple working on AR devices, which will come out in 2023, I think sometime in the first half of this decade, you will see a lot of very good devices. And there are certain device level problems that still need to be solved, right? Like the pair of glasses that you're wearing, can AR and VR come into really that, and at some future point in time really get into almost like a contact lens, right? That you
Right.
actually put it there, that you're actually able to see a very different world, like the Ready Player One, without having to actually go into that world, right?
Right. Right.
And so I know I talked a lot about this third aspect because out of these three, I'm probably most passionate about the AR VR world. But I would say at Antler and for Indian founders and Indian entrepreneurs to capture onto this wave of whether that's Web 3.0, whether that's climate, or whether that's AR VR, I think we can build a lot of great global companies, and each of these is going to accommodate hundreds of unicorns, right? And when I say unicorns, I don't just mean the valuation, as much as just saying that these are companies which will be really global in nature, have thousands of employees, impacting millions of customers. So the bull case for me for Indian founders is clearly there are 500 unicorns, maybe 100 decacons, and maybe 10 or 20. I don't even know what the word is for a $100 billion company. But I think the point with all this is, of course, not just the crazy valuations, but when someone is $100 billion company, they are probably a company that's globally impacting, right? They have hundreds of millions of customers, and they clearly are impacting the globe. If you are a decacon, you probably, a lot of the public companies in India, you are clearly having a pan India impact on, again, 50 to 100 million customers, right? And I think you will see a lot of Indian companies, Indian founders build those companies this decade. And at the end of the decade, the number today is what, 80, 85 number of unicorns. I think that will be in the few hundreds. I don't know whether it's
Understood.
400 or 500 or 600.
That's incredible. And Rajiv, particularly quite an interesting answer due to the reference to Ready Player One. And I think like you rightly mentioned, I think what AR VR does is that it democratizes experiences. And whether you live in India or you live in China or you live in say you live in South Africa, you can experience the same thing sitting from the comfort of your home. And hopefully it doesn't come to that point of Ready Player One where the outside world has become a total apocalypse.
And oh yeah, hopefully not. And that's the thing, right? See, the a lot of the next generation is going to have real relationships in the VR world, and that's
Understood.
okay. We
That's
from
fine.
our generations might think that, oh shucks, that's not a relationship, but for them that's a real relationship. So the way
Right.
everything from work to education to relationships to happiness to mental health to all the ways in which we live will undergo foundational fundamental changes which the previous generation will always sort of revolt against,
Understood.
but that's just that next generation will make super peace with it, and that's the way they will live. And how all of those happens is there's just a whole lot of very interesting things yet to be figured out, because the maturity of that device and that platform is pretty new, almost like the mobile phone in 2007.
Understood. Understood. Definitely. I think the AR VR world is also waiting for its Apple iPhone moment where the game changes completely. Right. So, Rajiv, I want to follow up on my previous question and look at the inverse of this. That what factors do you see are currently acting as blockers that need to be fixed for the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem to grow even more? And what sectors or industries do you see most impacted by such blockers?
I think what has changed in the last 3-4 years is I think capital is no longer a blocker. I think it's come in humongous droves to the market, and I think that's certainly one thing that has been unblocked. But having said that, I think there are two, three very foundational things which are still blockers, right? And I say blockers, these are not unsolvable problems, or like Antler, we are trying to solve two or three of these very core problems, right? First one, in the first 6 to 12 months of the founding journey, there's just a lot of ambiguity. Okay, there's a lot of ambiguity on every front. Whether your co-founder, you found your co-founder or not. Do you have the right kind of a team? Do you have the right capital? Are you going after the right problem for the next 10 years? Do you have the early product market fit? So stuff around just, I would say, talent, stuff around early product market fit, stuff around getting that first customer, stuff around getting that first global customer if you're building for the globe from India. I think there are enough and more challenges here which need systemic, endemic solutions, right? At Antler, we pride ourselves in solving some of these foundational problems. These are not overnight problems to solve. These take years, if not decades, to solve really well. And if I were to just call out the most important problem of all of it, I would say it's the talent, right? In terms of the number of engineers, number of designers, number of product managers, the number of marketeers
Right.
that at scale need to be in the system to be able to freely, first of all, flow between all of these different companies and create solutions which can be very differentiated in the long term. I think for that core foundational talent is still lacking, right? And and there is a lot of new age institutions of the world which are not the traditional institutions but the new age institutions. Education is one of the most funded categories in this country, which are trying to change that, right? In terms of the upgrads, the academies of the world, and hopefully they're able to do that, but it's going to still take some time because education is not an overnight problem, solution again. So I think there's a lot of new startups just in that space to sort of change the talent game. But again, as I said, that's not an overnight thing. So to get real foundational quality takes 3, 4, 5 years and 10 years of consistent work and really big hits to tell those stories and get more talent to work on it.
Understood. Understood. I think you might also be referring to the problem that currently Indian tech startups are facing, and that is I believe the extreme salary spikes that have taken place for technical or specialized roles, whether that is engineers, designers, product managers as well, and as well as I believe product marketing or growth marketeers. I think that is also might cause, while there is a lot of capital in place, but a lot of capital is also actually going towards just those core roles at the start.
It's very unhealthy. The Some of the salary levels is just very unhealthy and it's not
Right.
sustainable. That's because there's a talent problem. It just goes into the same set of people, and I mean, I'm no one to say whether it's right or wrong, but certainly in a long term, for sure, it just skews, and it just sort of skews the game too much towards people who have raised too much capital, right? Because that indiscipline
Understood.
comes in, and and smart founders who, for whatever reason, did not end up because maybe they were in a different macro cycle, maybe they were in a different space. That's just unfair, and it's not healthy. More than being fair or unfair, it's just not healthy.
Right, but I think when there is a correct when there will be a I think a correction in the overall the valuations or the overall capital cycle in general, I think that will have a second order effect on these unhealthy aspects as well of the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, you get lot stronger founders, lot stronger talent, lot more company cultures built during all these downtimes, right? You don't want
Right.
these downtimes to persist also for too long, but really that's when the people sort of stay back, right? Because you don't
Right.
get paid as much as the high times. But that's true. That's sort of, again, it's part of any ecosystem. It's part of any cycle. So
Right.
nothing that you or I or
So
anyone for that matter can do.
I work as a product manager, and I hope for hope otherwise, but yeah. Anyway.
I can imagine.
Right. Okay. Rajiv, let's do a deeper dive into how Antler India works. Okay, so Antler India invests at the earliest stages, right? And investing in startups is generally risky, and the more you go to an earlier stage, the more riskier it gets. So as the partner at Antler India, what do you look for in a startup when you invest in them?
I think at some broad level, everyone who's doing early stage investing outside of investing in people that you really know well is doing, these two, three things in some form and some scale, right? One is you're looking at what is the founder done? What have they built? How have they done? And it is not about their pedigree as much as have they gone and taken risks? Have they failed? Have they really built something which is meaningful, right? And of course, you could be a first time college founder, you could be a repeat founder doing a third startup. In all of these cases, there are ways to sort of evaluate that. The second is what we call the founder market fit, very abused term, is why is this founder building in this space? Is this because they're passionate about it? Is this very opportunistic? Is this that they really feel for a problem statement there? So you have your own ways to assess the founder market fit, but that's certainly a big second factor. The third is at some level the market structures. What's the market? Because VCs, the entire venture capital industry only plays in big markets. It could be a market which is big already or a market that's going to become big. Because venture capital can't play in markets that are small. You can never win the market, right? The market is small is, I mean, you can grow the market, but you can't build a venture capital firm in a $20 million market or $100 million market also, right? You need $1 billion market or a multi-billion dollar market to be able to raise venture capital. Typically, I'm saying, right? Or know that it's going to get to those multi-billion dollars and some punt and some bet over the next few years. So I would say the market and the market structures and what and how that is playing out is a big third factor in evaluating that startup. So, but these are the three factors. At the stage at which we go at a concept stage largely, 90% of the cases. So there is no product, there is no metrics, there is no revenue, there is no none of that. The founder is maybe found their co-founding team or just about finding their co-founder and just building their first MVP or version, first version of the product. So we can assess some parts of how good the product is, but not really because it's too early, the stage at which we go.
Understood. That makes a lot of sense. And Rajiv, you spoke about students, right? And I believe Antler India has also launched a fellowship which targets college students and provides them with capital and a lot of freedom to be able to build their ideas out. So why don't we speak about that in a little bit more detail?
Sure. I think and it was sort of using data that we got, right? In our first 10 investments, we saw two of them were college founders. So we just went deeper into understanding the consumer needs of what college founders. So we did a massive survey of a few hundreds of college founders and figured that while people who have become founders and have built out products, there is enough and more equivalent access to capital, there is a huge set of people waiting in the wings and not taken that big bold call because of a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because of a bit of peer pressure, maybe because of a bit of family pressure, maybe because they have an education loan, maybe because there is just this thing that, oh, you have to get a job right after you graduate, right? So we said, hey, why don't we try and change this game over the next 5-10 years, right? And obviously start with a small sort of a an initiative and try how that goes, right? So we launched the Antler India Fellowship November, December of 2021. And we've gotten a phenomenal response. We got 2,500 applications from across 700 colleges in the country of people who wanted to become a founder or were just starting to build stuff as side projects, right? And they didn't know if they were ready to take that full, bite to become a founder. So what we're doing is a 4-month program with individual mentorship and a $20,000 grant, right? Which is a huge
That's
amount of
incredible.
money. It's 15 lakhs. 15 lakhs is almost 1 or 2 years of salaries, even from the top campuses, right? To say
Right.
that, hey, you completely, don't worry about that. Just go build this out. And in the next 4 months, we engage with you, we interact with you, we roll out a program with you, we sort of get to know each other better. And at the end of those 4 months, we'll invest in you in the same terms that we invest in our other founders. And we have 8 teams that we picked for this. I don't know if we'll invest in all 8 teams, but every one of these 8 teams has the chance to get invested in by Antler, right? And that's huge because if we, let's say, invest in them at the end of the program in May or June, then we work with them post investment to also take them to the next round and the next round. And sort of really that's a 10-year journey right after. right? And in the worst case we don't, you at least have, capital to sort of pursue your dreams, and really take a shot at it and with no regrets, right? I think that's sort of what the Antler India Fellowship does. We hope to roll it out multiple times every year and sort of expand that to more students every year as we sort of scale that up. But I think there's just been a phenomenal response, and the need is pretty clear that there is. And also, the way we have structured the program over those 4 months is because we identify what are the challenges for first-time founders. All of these are first-time founders. Largely, all of them are engineering. We have a huge skew towards engineering founders. So we understand where the gaps are, right, in terms of working with people. They don't have real work experience. They don't know how to build an organization, right? So we have identified those very specific certain gaps in terms of business and people, and sort of making sure that we have programmatic interventions to help them be better founders.
Understood. That's incredible. That's incredible, Rajiv. Rajiv, you spoke about founder market fit. So let's apply that to you. So prior to Urban Ladder, you spent a decade. That is, I believe, your decade zero. At various large technology companies, including Yahoo, Cognizant, and Infosys. And I think it's safe to say that you're an incredible product and tech thinker. So now that you're donning the hat of a venture capitalist, what role do you personally play in the investments with Antler? Are you an operator or mentor, or are you strictly an investor?
I think it's a huge people role. The advantage for me during the Urban Ladder journey is I played three roles, right? The first role was heading brand and marketing and just building brand Urban Ladder. I think it first 2.5, 3 years before we got our first CMO in 2015 or 2016. That whole 3 years made me understand how to build a zero to one brand, whether that was in terms of customer service, social media, messaging, marketing, merchandising, branding. That experience building probably one of India's first quote unquote D2C brands when the word D2C was not even there, right?
Right.
To scale it up to approximately 100 crores in the first 3-4 years. I think, just using digital channels and social media and stuff, I think that was a phenomenal experience, right? Building brand Antler has been very similar. I think in the last 1 year, we've been able to build brand Antler very, very strong, right? I don't think people recognize Antler in India as 1 year old, right?
Right.
Literally, we got 8,000 applications last year across what we
That's
did,
incredible.
right? And another 2,500 student applications, so 10,000 applications, and very few 1 year brands get that kind of a scale, right? So that's the first experience that I would say thanks to Urban Ladder. The second, but the most important role I play though is that of understanding people. I also was the head of HR at Urban Ladder for 7 years, right?
Understood.
So that's a 1,200 member team, right? So everything around working with people, the trust quotients, vision, values, sort of how do you get people engaged and how do you sort of spot people and talent? I think that's really what it is, the venture game also. You're spotting people, especially at the stage at which Antler plays. You're spotting talent. It's maybe a different kind of a talent. It's founder talent
Understood.
versus, let's say,
Understood.
great marketing or engineering talent, but it is still talent nevertheless, right? So at the spotting stage, I think a lot of the role that I play is to understand the psyche and why a person is doing what they're doing. And during the early phases, sort of working with them to define the vision and the values. So a very specific intervention and a workshop that I do with all our founders, whether that's the Antler India Fellowship or the Antler program or the portfolio, is identifying the vision and values of the company and setting the first set of how they go recruit their first 2-3 people, right? This is something that is so critical for a startup success that you can't ever know the importance of it until many years later, right? So I spend a lot
Right.
of time on that. And the third part, of course, is tech and product, which is sort of my core experience with Yahoo, Cognizant, and Infosys. And while obviously I was also the CTPO at Urban Ladder and worked on a variety of things, whether that's a very differentiated experience on mobile or AR, VR, or backend, I think there, of course, you already have founders who are very strong on product and tech. So I actually play that much lesser as a hat as an investor on the tech and product. But of course, you are able to sort of go deep into how to do customer research or what you look for in a product, specifically consumer products, because of my experience. But those are more sort of brainstorming sessions, which is not really the core scope of my work as much as the first two. So,
Understood.
so, so
Understood.
really, the first part on the brand and the people is to also build Antler as an institution, right? Between Nitin and me, what we're trying to build, we already have 15 member team. is to build Antler as an institution here. So it's not just the brand, but also the Antler people, right? Getting the smart people who are much smarter than me or Nitin on certain of these different functions, whether that's finance, whether that's
Right.
capital, marketing, scouting, portfolio. We've got a super team, right? And in the last 12 months, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm proud of, in addition to our investments and the founders that we get to work with, is really the team.
That's incredible, Rajiv. Right. So, Rajiv, I want to switch gears now. Okay. You spoke about the Web3 space earlier, the crypto and the Web3 space, all right? And recently, I believe you also announced that a third of your corpus will be for blockchain and crypto startups, right? So, just to summarize this, why Web3, why now, and what's next from Antler India in the Web3 space?
I think two sort of trends and big reasons, right? One is for us at Antler, given we're a global organization and we have a big belief in build from India for the world, the kind of companies, more than even SaaS or just consumer companies, Web 3.0 companies, as I explained earlier, are companies which are by inherent nature decentralized and can be global. And it fits in very well with our thesis and our just Antler as an institution, right? So that's a very core reason. Two is our own experience and expertise between Nitin, and Nitin is far more well versed. He was India's first investor in Web 3.0 and crypto. He started investing in 2017. He has a portfolio of 15, 20 companies
That's incredible.
and him and Kathy, who's part of our team, who leads portfolio, have been investing in the Web3 space for a huge amount of time. Kathy was even a founder of a blockchain company before she came on board Antler. And so between Nitin and Kathy and our global team, which again has a bunch of partners and a bunch of folks across different geographies, we have sort of taken the lead on running the show, everything blockchain and Web 3.0, right? Because of, again, Nitin's background. So that's the other reason in terms of team capability, team interest, team expertise. Last but not the least, just the here and now of it. Not just because India talks a lot more about crypto today, or the younger founders are building. It's just a way of life. You talk to the 20-year-old, a huge chunk of them either have their first NFT or have their some account in one of the crypto exchanges. And really, I think if you are building an institution for the next few decades and you're working with talent which is coming up from the colleges in the 20 to 30, you are looking at things which they feel are important. And clearly that generation and that audience feels that the way for the future outside of climate and the metaverse is actually Web 3.0, right? Because everyone wants decentralization, everyone wants uh, some kind of a share of what efforts they are putting in, and no one wants to be associated or attached to just one Web 2.0 profile or company, right?
Right. Right.
Because there's just a fundamental nature of democratization, decentralization, which the way the audience of the newer age thinks, right? So there is clearly a here and now to your question. Yes, there is a here and now also, that this is becoming more and more prevalent and talked about right now than even 12 to 15, 18 months back, right? So that's sort of the other reason, sort of we felt that the more we engage with the audience, the more we engage with founders. This is just a truly uh, phenomenally new space in which the web itself is going to move towards. So those are 2-3 reasons that I can think of, which is why we talked about making a reasonably big bet across India and the global fund investments in India to get almost a third of the fund.
Hopefully your investments go to the moon in the Web3 space.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes. I have one last question for you, Rajiv. What advice do you have for other aspiring entrepreneurs, or as we like to call them, Indianauts?
I try and tell people I'm too young to be giving advice. I'm not too young, but I think, now is probably the best time ever to build, right? There's so much access to everything. There's so much access to mentorship, uh, capital, talent, ideas. You mail anyone, they're going to respond. So if anyone, whether that's a 20-year-old in a college, whether that's a 25 to 30-year-old in a startup, whether that's a 30 to 40-year-old in a big company, I think there has never been a better time. And maybe it's 10 years later, if I address someone, maybe at that time there's never been a better time. But certainly today, I can tell you, having done this 10 years back, uh, there is today the time is 10x better than 10 years back, 10x better, okay, in every
Understood.
front. So
Understood.
just make that bet, make that jump. You just People think that they have too much to lose in terms of education loan and this and that and home loan. Actually, it's not. In a couple of years, if things don't go well, there is always people who will value your experience. So just make that bet. Don't live with that regret. Don't die with that regret of wanting to start up but never having done it. And
Right.
I was lucky to have made that bet for a variety of other things that worked in my favor. I'm not sort of trivializing that, but I think absolutely you should go build it. And I would say then you will not have a regret. You started as a side project, started as a full-time thing, do a sabbatical, whatever it is, just go build.
Understood. That's excellent advice, Rajiv. Thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you and Antler the best of luck for the future.
Thanks, Gautam, for having me, and best wishes on your podcast too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode. The Indianaut podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to receive all updates on the upcoming episodes. We'll see you in the next one.